So, in this episode of the Astrocartography podcast with Vera Luce, we're going to find your power places with Jupiter. We're going to talk about Jupiter on every angle of the four angles in astrology. We have a famous chart, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I have examples from my own life in parts of Europe and also in the US. We're going to talk about Jupiter's role in finding relationships, the potential for finding places to go on or lead a retreat, or actually go on a honeymoon or a wedding or an anniversary event. Jupiter can be pretty positive for a lot of us, but I am going to share some stories of the challenges as well. So get ready for the Jupiter journey. Jupiter loves to journey. Jupiter is the pilgrim planet. And why don't we start today with just talking about who Jupiter is, right? Astrologically. Um, Jupiter is a planet that represents growth and expansion and opportunity. It's a planet that wants to uplift and give us optimism in our life. And there's a joyous quality with Jupiter. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, which is Christmas time of the year in the northern hemisphere. Jupiter also rules Pisces, which is that end of the winter time season, and we're kind of in a more mystical place with that. So Jupiter can be, a planet that can give us teaching and teachers. And so when we go to Jupiter lines, we just feel like, wow, there's some positive energy here for me. But the shadow is that Jupiter can be overinflated, meaning it could be naive and thinking it can do too much. Um, it can over exaggerate things, right? Like live in a hyperbolic type of way. What I mean is hyperbole, like everything's too much or bigger, and if we're not careful, like we could spend too much on Jupiter lines. Um, we can be a bit arrogant on Jupiter lines. And sometimes our faith can be really tested. Um, so we can go beyond our means in some ways. And we don't want to hold back. We don't know how to limit ourselves. So, and this all depends on the condition as well of Jupiter in your chart. And this is a really important thing. So we're going to look now at a famous map. And I'm going to take you into into astro.com, because that is what a lot of people are using as a free software. But I will warn and caution that we don't want to just make a big decision based off of the astro.com map, because we're not getting the full story of what this planet is all about in our charts. Meaning, what aspects, what other planets does Jupiter or any line that we're looking at, what does it have in association with it? Because that's going to fill out the story of that planet. In astro.com, you'll have to put in the birth data, and you have to choose the AstroClick travel section over here. It also doesn't have local space as part of the main map. You're going to have to look at that over here. And it's something I look at, of course, with all my clients. The local space is very important. You'll have to click on harmonious aspects, disharmonious aspects, to show details here to get more specificity. So if you miss any of those steps, you're getting just a part of the story, and you won't also see the full analysis of who Jupiter is in your chart, which I'm going to talk about with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, when he moved from Graz, Austria, he came over to the US and was here in California, of course, in LA, and he was bodybuilding. And and one of the things that we know right away um, is that you may be questioning first why it doesn't look like Jupiter is over California. For those listening on the podcast, Jupiter is on the angle of career in Arizona. It's fairly close to Phoenix. Also up in southwestern Utah, Las Vegas, really strong up in Idaho. But it's like, it doesn't really look like so much in LA. Actually, it's about 3 to 4 degrees away from LA, Hollywood, and about 4 to 5 degrees away from Sacramento. This is very significant. It's a very strong aspect. Um, it's definitely influential at that many degrees. And we're going to prove that right now with what happened along this line. He's also on a Venus line, which is very significant too. But this Jupiter midheaven is everything that happened to Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, in a nutshell, when he went, he was bodybuilding and very quickly became very famous as a bodybuilder. And he actually started a publication about bodybuilding, and Jupiter rules publishing. So that's really interesting. He started a magazine about publishing, kind of teaching through that how to grow, as a bodybuilder. Um, Now let's pause and just remember that Jupiter is on the angle of career, which is what we're known for. It's our reputation. That's the MC, the midheaven. And one of the things about Jupiter is that Jupiter is the biggest planet, right? Jupiter is gigantic, and we said, it's like it's almost its own solar system, and it has so many moons going around it. Um, so he was literally known as Jupiter, as the biggest man, right? And won competitions for this. Um, okay, so that's a very literal symbol. Now, Jupiter also rules law in astrology, and eventually, of course, we know that Arnold Schwarzenegger became the governor of California, and so there it is, right? And he's known as the governor or the governator, right? Now, there's another aspect here, and this is something again you can't see in the maps, but when we look at his chart, we know that his Jupiter is in Scorpio, and as Arnold Schwarzenegger moved from bodybuilding into film and Hollywood, he had these roles that he got very famous for. One of them was Conan the Barbarian, right? And he was showing off his big muscles in that, and but it was a warlike energy. And then he was in Predator, which was a very violent film and very dark, kind of horror-ish type of film. And then he was, of course, in Terminator multiple times, which is a very, the 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 apocalyptic type of, film and the ultimate expression of AI. And I'm mentioning this because these are very scorpionic types of films, where there's like death and themes of destruction or devastation built into or violence built into the films. Well, that's very Scorpio, and his Jupiter is in Scorpio, the angle of career there, right? So this shows us that when you move, there's a new sign potentially on the area of career or wherever that planet is that we're studying. In this case, it was Scorpio, and Jupiter, the symbol of Jupiter, was very strong there. All right, so yeah, he's just a really brilliant example of this quality of Jupiter. Now, I'm going to show you my maps on in the U.S. here on astro.com, and you're going to see Jupiter rising. And I want to point this out first because I learned about this line. I got kind of fascinated with it early on when I was doing astrolocality about 20 years ago. And about 5 years after that, so we're talking about 2012, 2013, I started traveling a lot along this line, and I taught a lot. This was right around when my first two books came out, 2010 and 2012, and I actually taught right on top of this line. So I have Jupiter rising, for those listening, goes right over St. Paul, Minneapolis. It goes down through a lot of Illinois, some of Tennessee, into Georgia, right over Atlanta, and right over Miami, Fort Lauderdale, in Florida. And I have taught in all of these places. I taught at an astrology workshop in St. Paul, Minneapolis. I also taught in Madison, Wisconsin, 2 different times, and I DJ'd there, and that's right off of this line here. And then, in Chicago, again, I'm very close to this line. I went there multiple times, and I also taught astrology and human design. I also taught families, evolutionary parenting with astrology, and I do have Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, which is the sign of nurturing and family. Um, so that's, symbolically rich. Um, and remember that Jupiter is rising for me. So the rising sign is how we appear and our personality. and we also what we can be known for because it's out on the surface, So I was known for teaching, but also I've Jupiter ruling my area of career. So it helps my career going on a Jupiter line. For some people, it might help different areas of their chart. It might help their creative process. It might help their sense of home. Um, but for me, Jupiter rules the areas of partnership and of career. And um, and so I also performed elements of my book when I went on tour here in 2012 for my book, The Shamanic Artist and the Rise of the Wounded Healer, Aquarius Dawns. And I did that in Chicago and actually Madison as well. So, you know, that element of my career as a performing artist. Um, Now this also, the teaching continued. I've taught in Atlanta and I've also, uh, taught down here in Miami, or Fort Lauderdale area, um, Delray area. Now, something really significant, is that these places I also learned a lot. And because Jupiter is the teacher and the expander and represents sort of wisdom, um, I studied deep memory process regression therapy with my teacher in Florida. And I also studied rebirthing and liberation breath work with my teacher, Sandra Ray, in Florida. And those were really significant trainings for me. And they really informed my life path, my personal healing, and then I have offered those as well to clients. So then, what I learned on that Jupiter line, I then taught or offered as well. So this is a really important point about Jupiter as a planet of expansion, that it can really grow us to the point with what we learn on those lines we can then become a teacher of those very things. So now I'm going to stop the screen share there, and I actually want to show you the other software that I use primarily, so I could show you the local space line and talk about local space Jupiter and go into Europe. Now, before I do this, I want to make a point about Jupiter lines. You know, Jupiter also can be challenged depending on what signs and houses he might be in, just like any planet. And if Jupiter's in Gemini or Virgo or Capricorn, these are more challenging places for Jupiter. If you have that in your chart. And I have an example of an anonymous chart that I want to show to you about this, um, because I think this will be a way for you to understand that it's not just go to a Jupiter line and everything will be amazing. I mean, it can be. It very much can be. They can be the best places for us. Um, I would usually not say, for instance, that Pluto lines would be the best places for us, but I have had some experiences with clients who became very wealthy on their Pluto lines. So this is why we never make a black and white statement with astrology and especially with astrocartography and locational astrology, because everything is in context of your chart. And this is really important. So I even have an example from my own life with this. So we will look at this idea of planets not in their favorite signs, let's say, through a sample chart. But first, we're going to look at my own map here because I think this is really striking. And again, this is on solar maps. And we have this, you're going to see here, these maps. And on solar maps, we don't have the possibility of seeing kind of the Google Maps, unfortunately. But I've been using this software for a very long time. And that's why I want to share this with you. All right, great. So we got this. We're going to look at the map over Europe. And as we do this, I want to point out that there is a local space line. Now, these are like personal feng shui lines. These are lines that you know, are very important in terms of how proximity you have to them, how close you are living to them or traveling to them. And just like with the astrocartography lines on the angles, it really depends on how close you are, how strong that influence will be. And um, the Jupiter local space line will bring expansion and growth and inspiration and a lot of those things we've talked about. Now, one of the things is that um, I was in Ireland this last year and I was working on an art residency in Western Cork. And I ended up writing tons of poetry during that time. That was one of my big focuses. And here it is, Jupiter's going right through Ireland. I kind of love Ireland. I haven't been that much, but I really want to keep going back. Um, a lot of the teachers that I really mm, resonate with, two of them particularly, David White and John O'Donohue, these great poets and theologians, speakers, um, they're from Ireland, you know, or live there part of the time. So that's also significant because you have teachers along the Jupiter line. Now, I have had a very significant partnership in my life and a long-term relationship that partner is based in London, and I've lived in London with that partner for some time as well, and that's very close to this Jupiter line for me. So that remember that Jupiter in my chart rules partnership. So this is again where if you're trying to find relationships, we want to find where the planet that rules partnership is very strong for you in the world. All right, so now I'm gonna show you something else. Here you're gonna see this, in Jupiter on the angle of career. For me, um, it's kind of opposite of Arnold. I was born in California and, have mine, over Austria kind of almost and, Europe, and he was born in Austria and has his over California. So, um, now this is really important, and I wanna show you this actually through another software that I use with clients called Sirius. And Sirius has these really cool treasure maps. And so for those listening, the treasure maps have these like red and yellow lines where the 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 idea or the theme that it's trying to relate to is very strong. So I looked up optimism and opportunity, which has to do a lot with Jupiter lines, some Venus lines, some other things. So it's using aspects in the chart, and it's showing where those, in this case, optimism and opportunity can come. And wow, it's super strong here in this part of Europe, which is going down through um, some of Sweden, the like Estonia, Latvia, down through right through Poland, Hungary, Serbia, down into Albania and Greece. So these have been very significant places in my life. I want to share that with you because I reached out in 2016 to a tantra festival in Poland, which was happening like north of Warsaw, and they said they were all full with their teachers. I thought they might be because it was very late in application process. But actually, then I recontacted them, and when I did, it was just like I think maybe 2 months before. They said that one of their teachers had canceled that week, and I could come teach there. Now that's a Jupiter break, right? That's catching a lucky break, and and I went and I taught, and my work was very well received there. And because of teaching at that festival, I also did music at that festival. Um, so there is that theme kind of going on, corresponding for me. The Jupiter can bring both the performance and the teaching. Um, I met someone who became a collaborator, a lover, and that was really significant for me. I went back the next year, and I actually led ecstatic dances. I led shamanic ceremonies. I also taught again, and it was really expansive for me. Um, so I've been there a few times and had, excuse me, multiple really significant relationships there and connections and a feeling of growth, and it also happened in Hungary. In Hungary, right on this line as well, I also got a teaching gig at the Azora Festival, a huge, huge psytrance festival. I think it was also 2016, and so I taught a workshop there, and that was a really, I ended up doing some readings for people, had a great time, got a free ticket for that. Um, Hung out in Budapest, a city that I love. Um, and then, I haven't been to Serbia, but I did spend some time on my Jupiter line in Albania. I didn't have a huge amount of opportunities open up there for me, but I was swimming all the time. I do have Jupiter in Cancer, a water sign, and, just kind of enjoyed a month there last year. But another thing happened, and this is where I want to bring up. You could see that Jupiter's going through the midheaven in Greece, um, pretty strong in Athens, and I've also traveled. I've also traveled to Greece with two different partners. That Jupiter rules my area of partnership, and so what I want to say with this is that Jupiter, um, because it rules career and partnership. Um, I led a retreat, that went through Delphi and Epidaurus and different parts, of Greece, including Crete. But during that time, I was having a really, um, significant pivot in a relationship that I was in, and it was a relationship with the person I was teaching with. And that ended up becoming a very difficult experience for me. Now, though the retreat itself went through a lot of transformation. And I'm bringing that up because Jupiter rules career and partnership. And what was happening with the partnership was affecting what was happening with the retreat and the career. And even though it was Jupiter and there was growth there was also challenge there. And I have Jupiter square my nodes, and so there was something karmic happening, something that was about destiny, and it really did write the next chapter of parts of my life. Um, just like it did in this really positive, expansive way in Poland. And I'm bringing that up just to say that, it's not just joyful sometimes, with Jupiter, and we have to also be careful. Um, and so if I go back to the maps, I wanna show you this example chart, and I think this is gonna be really helpful to understanding where else we might come into just a challenge potentially with a Jupiter location. Um, and so we're gonna look at this map of Danielle. Actually, I wanna show you what I have here. Now, this is an anonymous made up chart. And I'm showing you this because I wanna give this example. So I just put in this birth data, August 28th, 84, 9:23 AM, Miami. And in this chart, Jupiter is in Capricorn and retrograde. And and then is square to the angle of the ascendant, the personality, the self, and the angle of relationships. Jupiter has a positive aspect, a helpful aspect to Mercury. It's kind of a wide trine. They're in the same sign. Sorry, same element. But you know, mm, and Jupiter is actually kind of in a loose trine to the Sun, out of sign. So it's kind of a mixed story with Jupiter because he's in a sign, Capricorn, which is about hard work and structure and focus and discipline. And that's not Jupiter's main drives in life. Jupiter's about expansion and opportunities and going with the flow and, you know, um, abundance, whereas Capricorn's about like, sort of minimalism and like, streamlining. And so Jupiter is in exaltation in the opposite sign, Cancer. And when I look at this chart, I also see Jupiter retrograde there may, and that's not uncommon, but there may be some hesitations to really, just going for it like Jupiter does, right? Or just jumping out and being a teacher like we might think with Jupiter. Um, and so when we're putting Danielle around a Jupiter line, we have to consider this, and also that there may be challenges to her relationships, like maybe her work responsibilities, which would increase because Jupiter's in Capricorn, usually bringing us more work or more responsibility and accountability. That might challenge a relationship, some of the adventures or things that might want to happen in relationship. Or she might say yes to too much. Jupiter squaring her ascendant, might take on too much, be overly, overcommit. Very strong possibility with Jupiter in Capricorn. And so I would point that out to this, potential client, Danielle, that we'd have to be a little bit careful with either how close we live on that Jupiter line, um, or just, you know, what kind of responsibilities are you gonna have there? Is this something you really wanna take on? Like, she would have this Jupiter rising in Turkey, the capital, kind of in Ankara. There's some, sorry, in Istanbul. There's some other things going on here. But, if you're going to, Cairo in Egypt, or if you're going to, parts of Turkey or Cyprus, or even Crete in Greece and some of the Greek islands, Jupiter would be rising. I could see that maybe if you're doing a retreat, this might work because you have responsibilities there as a teacher. You'd want to be very structured there. You'd want to really manage and have everything really administered very well with that. And then it could be successful. But, um, we have to be careful, like, who we're working with and that we're not overextending ourselves, right? And so I'm just pointing that out as, yes, there would be opportunities on this Jupiter rising line for this client. But, we have to be a bit careful with, just knowing the condition of what's going on with that Jupiter in the chart. This is something that you can't pick up again by just looking at a map. You have to actually look at the charts. The other thing is this really amazing tool that I do a lot of work in called cyclocartography. And this is where we are forecasting over regions. So let's say I was working with Danielle and she's like, I want to go to Europe, maybe this year, maybe next year. Are there some places I could have this opportunity somewhere? Or maybe I want to teach, maybe I want to lead a retreat, or host an event. Well, is that happening during that time, and where? Well, this is where cyclocartography becomes really powerful because we can drill down into specific years, months, weeks, days where there are certain opportunities or aspects that you really want to pick up on and take advantage of. And obviously Jupiter transits can be big for that. Um, let's look at this map. So I'm looking at 1 year from now when I started to see in August Jupiter coming to the angle of career for her. But it's not quite strong yet. But if we look at um, this is so let's say mid-September, I'm going to get this into the weeks here. And so if you're listening, we're looking at the planet Jupiter as it goes over Portugal, Ireland, um, and this is the end of September. Now, if I just take this forward, we can see that this line, like let's say she does want to go to, maybe she wants to do a retreat in the Algarve, right? The south of Portugal. And she's got this really great energy, I would say from 17th of September to the 30th. There's like a kind of a 2-week window we like to give for a Jupiter transit. Now, sometimes you could have Jupiter over an area multiple times over the course of 4 to 5 to 6 months because of Jupiter's retrograde. And, this is when I get really strategic with my clients. If they do want to lead a retreat or an event or live somewhere, and have a Jupiter influence for that time, maybe they're digital nomad or This could be great again with a honeymoon or travel for a couple. Um, yeah, if Jupiter's crossing multiple times and you want to stay somewhere, that would be great. But if not, you got this 2-week window. And for her, Jupiter on the angle of career could be really expansive for her during that time in Portugal. And it's going to continue moving eastward on this map. And so then we could be like, well, actually, I really want to go to Italy and do this, this retreat. Well, then we'd have to move this forward and we could find the months when that's going to happen, you know? And oh, there's a retrograde. So, we're seeing that Jupiter doesn't quite get to Italy, in 2027. So she's going to have to wait to 2028. Um, but she has multiple opportunities in Spain because of the retrograde. So he has multiple crossings, that multiple date options, I would say, that open in that part of Europe. So this is really helpful, right? If we are planning an event, a retreat. And so this is what I do. I help retreat leaders plan when they're going to do their events and where they're going to do them around the world. There's so many options, right? And where it might be a bit challenging, So if you already know a place, what energies are there for you, or if you really want to pick up on, say, a Jupiter line, then we can look and find those places and start to map that out years in advance, which is really important for retreat leaders. Also, again, if you're a digital nomad, you want some opportunities with the people that you're around, right? Jupiter lines can be great for that. Obviously, for finding partners, we've seen that in my own life. If you're a teacher of any kind, these can be great lines. If you want to find a really abundant feeling of home, or maybe you do want to live with a co-living situation with a lot of people, a lot of learning in the space, that can be great with Jupiter lines. Lots of opportunities with Jupiter. So I would love to support you with this. You can look below and you'll see some links to learn more about astrocartography, locational astrology. We combine this work as well with human design and how to live your design appropriately in locations that you're going to possibly move or travel or live on. Um, Really beautiful synthesis. And we can bring in your business as well to a holistic lifestyle design. And I've traveled to 47 countries. So, I live this in my own life. Obviously, I go to my Jupiter lines and I've taught there and I will continue to go there in my life. And I hope to support you with that as well. So, Jupiter, we love Jupiter. Be careful, not too much on a Jupiter line, and hope to support you more soon. If you want to know more about another really positive line for a lot of people, a line that can bring in relationships, check out the video on Venus. I have lots of personal stories there and a very famous chart as well. So until the next Astrocartography with Vera Luz podcast, take care, travel well, travel safe, all the best. Namaste.